Welcome to Sasquatch Theory. In today's video, we have a collection of Bigfoot encounters and experiences. I made sure to go through the emails and find the most exciting and well-written stories that were submitted to the channel. If you have a Bigfoot encounter that you would like to talk about, please reach out at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. I want to thank all the people that have ordered merchandise, and I really appreciate everyone for supporting the channel. You guys are amazing, and I don't know what I'd do without you guys. Alright, let's not waste any more time, and I don't want to bore you guys with a long intro. Let's dive straight into the Sasquatch email stories. This first email is called Terror at Mountain Fork River. Hello, Miguel. My name is Charles, and you can use my name if you wish. I have nothing to hide or be ashamed of. I'm too old to be worried about what non-believers might have on their petty minds. Now, a little info about myself. I am of Native American and German heritage, precisely Cherokee and Choctaw, with a small amount of Irish, Scottish, and Bohemian thrown into the mix. I'd always had a love for the outdoors, whether it be camping, hunting, fishing, or hiking. That's until this damn creature took it all away from me. I excelled in the Boy Scouts of America, football, baseball, and track. I worked as an oil field well service operator in the Texas oil field for 25 years, and then went to work for the United States Postal Service and retired in 2017 after 23 years of service. And so it begins. The day that I found out that there were giant creatures known as Bigfoot. My encounter happened in 1974. I was 21 years old. For 48 years, I kept this encounter to myself, and I'm still dealing with PTSD. This is my encounter. I needed some downtime away from my oil field job, so I planned a vacation to Beavers Bend State Park in southeast Oklahoma during the first week of March in 1974. My wife, who was 6 months pregnant, and I had planned to tent camp on the Mountain Fork River below the dam on Broken Bow Lake for 4 days. My wife and I ended up renting a campsite which was on the south side of the park. It was about 40 yards from a cement dam on the river. This made the upper portion of the river deeper for swimming, better kayaking, and fishing. It was very beautiful weather, with the lows in the mid-50s and the highs up in the 70s. The first 2 days were simply amazing. We had fresh fish for breakfast and dinner both days. Now, on the morning of the third day, I got up at 5 a.m., made a pot of coffee, had 2 cups, and then I grabbed my tackle box, rod and reel, and a 5-gallon bucket to put my catch in. Then I walked down to the cement dam where I had fished the previous 2 days. This morning, there was about an 8-mile-per-hour breeze blowing in my face from the southeast. The sun was just starting to rise when I made my first cast, using an inline single spinner 1-ounce lure called Shyster, white with black dots and a white horsehair skirt, over a barbless treble hook. After fishing for about 25 minutes, I had a 3-pound smallmouth bass and 2 rainbow trout of about 2 pounds each. I had planned on catching 1 more fish and then call it quits. As I made my next cast, the lure hung up behind me on what I thought was going to be a tree limb. So I turned, looking up to see where my lure had caught the limb, but all I could see was a wall of cinnamon brown hair about 5 feet from me. My lure had hung up in the upper left chest of something that I didn't know existed. My head was about 4 to 5 inches below its belly button, and I'm 6 foot tall. It was around 11 to 12 feet tall, 5 to 6 feet across the shoulders, and somewhere between 1,200 to 1,300 pounds, and its biceps were as big as my 36-inch waist. My eyes slowly moved up to its face. It had a conical-shaped head. The eyes were as big as a Coke can and red. It was looking down at me and snarling. His teeth were very large, and they were twice the size of a horse's tooth. His head looked to be the size of a 5-gallon bucket. He had a protruding brow ridge, a hooded nose, and his skin was a very dark, leathery brown, and the creature had a slightly wrinkled face. I could not move. I could hear and feel a very low growl that seemed to rattle all the bones in my body, and there was a pressure all over my body that I can't explain. Miguel, at this moment, I truly believed that my life was over. I couldn't speak, scream, or holler, but I remember thinking, "Oh my God, I am so sorry for hurting you." Then, like turning off a light switch, everything went black. I passed out. I believe that was about 6:30 a.m. when I woke up. My watch read 7 a.m. I felt as though all my energy had been drained, and I had a terrible headache. I sat up shaking uncontrollably and sweating heavily. As I looked around, I saw that my tackle box had been smashed flat. My rod was broken into 4 pieces, and the 3 fish that I had caught were taken out of the 5-gallon bucket. After regaining some of my composure, I saw 2 footprints where that damn thing had been standing. I remembered having a measuring tape, so I measured both prints. They were 22.5 inches long, 10 inches across the ball of the foot, and 7 inches across the heel. Miguel, I had never seen footprints so huge. I was still shaking uncontrollably, and I just had to get the hell away from there. So I picked up all of my crushed and broken fishing equipment and carried it to a trash bin where I had disposed of it. I walked back to the camp, sat down, and poured myself another cup of coffee and waited for my wife to get up. When she exited the tent, I poured her a cup of coffee, and she asked, "How was the fishing this morning?" I explained to her that during the night, someone had came into camp and had stolen all of my fishing gear. Man, she was pissed, but that was a lot better than me trying to explain to her what I had actually seen and what had transpired down at the river. At this point, I was still feeling so very lucky to be breathing and alive. I had one more cup of coffee, and then I told my wife that I just wasn't feeling well at all and that I was just ready to go home. You know, I can't help believe that damn creature had been watching me catfish and just wanted my darn fish. To this day, I still can't believe how that SOB snuck up behind me without me knowing it. Since that day, I've given away all my fishing gear. I stopped going to forested areas, and only within the last couple of years have I had an interest in finding out more about what it is that took my love of the outdoors. You know, back in the old day, I didn't know anything about PTSD, but I'm pretty sure that's what I was experiencing. Then came the night terrors. At least once and sometimes twice a night, my screaming, kicking, and punching would wake everyone and everything in the house. That creature would be creeping up on me from behind while in a spider crawl position, and then I would turn around and see him. At that point, he would bounce to his feet, grab me by the shoulders, and pick me up where we were looking eye to eye. He was snarling, and then he started to open that huge mouth. At this point, I would wake up and be covered in sweat, and I would be hyperventilating. I had these terrors every night or every other night for about a year. After that, they became somewhat more sporadic for the next 47 years now. They seem to only happen about once a month. Thank God. The end. Miguel, these are pics that a well-renowned painter and sketch artist, Sabella Irwin, rendered from my description of the creature in my encounter. Wow, that is a sight for sore eyes, and that's a face that only a mother could love. I'm sorry that you experienced that, Charles, and to know that a creature that ugly and that huge was standing only 5 feet behind you would be terrifying. I know I've reached out in the past, and I'm sorry I haven't read your email until now, but if you would consider it, I'd love to have you on the show, and believe me, I know it's difficult to talk about. If you would consider it, and maybe we could meet up. I live in Missouri, and if you're in Oklahoma, we're not too far away. So I could drive down. You could take me to the place you encountered this creature, and we could do a documentary. But I'll leave that up to you, and as of now, I know you're not willing to talk about it. So I just want to say I hope you get feeling better. I hope the PTSD goes away and all the night terrors. I know what it's like. I experienced that with paranormal activity, and it really messed up my life, my daily routine, and, interacting with my friends and daily life. So I understand what it's like. So I hope you get feeling better, and thank you so much for sending in your encounter to Sasquatch Theory. I appreciate it. Man, that story really creeped me out. I know I've gotten the feeling that I was being watched when fishing, and I've heard plenty of encounter stories where people claim they were fishing and the Sasquatch came out, or, they could hear him in the woods making all kinds of noise. It certainly appears the Sasquatch was being territorial about Charles fishing in the area. I doubt he was expecting a gift from Charles. I think he just came in and took the fish and scared the crap out of him. I'm glad you made it out all right and that you weren't physically harmed. I do have some more questions about the story. If you ever did want to do an interview, like how did the Sasquatch get the hook out of him, and did you pass out before that, or did more go down? I'd love to hear more about the story. And all right, yeah, let's move on to the next email. We have an email from Bourbon, Missouri, and a couple goes camping down the Merrimack River, and they hear some growling inside of a cave late at night, and they're trapped on the river until morning time. So let's get right into that and see what it's all about. All right, this email is submitted by Kathy from Bourbon, Missouri, Merrimack River. Hi, Miguel. My husband and I had an experience around 1981. We went on an overnight float trip on the upper Merrimack in Bourbon, Missouri. It was in the spring, on a Monday, so we were the only ones on the river. We got put into our canoes by Joe from Joe's Canoe Rentals. It's probably not in business anymore. We made about half the float, then we pulled off and climbed a hill to a rock overhang that overhung a wall with an opening to a cave. It was a place lots of people knew of, as there were signs that other people had camped there before. It was a stone floor with 3 walls and like a roof overhang of stone. The opening to the cave was on the back wall. A man could fit into the opening. We did not explore the cave. We set up camp and eventually went to sleep. Around 1 a.m, I woke up to the sound of a man breathing coming from inside the cave. I woke my husband, and he could hear it as well. Then we would hear whatever it was move around, as its fur would scratch against the walls as it moved. Each time it moved like that, a group of bats would fly out of the cave. It would make grunting noises as well. My husband remembers aggressive sounding grunting, and he remembers whatever it was, like stomping its feet, and he said when it did that, the ground beneath him would shake. I probably missed out on noticing that because I was having a huge problem with my legs shaking from fear so bad, and they were shaking against my sleeping bag and making noise. I was afraid the noise, it would attract whatever it was, so I was trying so hard to concentrate and trying to get my legs to stop shaking. Finally, my husband told me there was a ledge of a cliff attached to the outside wall, but he said we would have to climb up to get to it. He didn't think I could climb it. Well, I climbed it. It was true rock wall climbing. We sat on that cliff for the rest of the night. When daylight finally came, I stayed out on the cliff and kept a watch on the opening of the cave while my husband went back down to pack up all of our stuff. We continued on with our float trip, but it was awful. The road was narrow and there was tall reeds along both sides. I was so afraid something was going to come out of those reeds to get us. We finally made it to our stop, off point, and Joe picked us up. We asked him if there were any bears in Missouri. According to the Missouri Conservation Department, at the time, there was not. Joe said yes. We said, well, we had one in our cave last night. He said, oh, they're just honey bears, not much bigger than a good-sized dog. He went on to say Kansas didn't have any turkeys and we didn't have any bears, so we gave them some turkeys and they gave us some bears. That was such a weird thing to say considering MDOC said we didn't have bears in Missouri. I now wonder if he knew there was something out there and didn't want word to get out, so he just said that about bears. He wouldn't want word to get out because it might affect his canoe rental business. So to this day, we don't know what was in our cave that night, but I do wonder if it was Bigfoot. I enjoy your videos. Keep it up. Kathy. Thank you, Kathy, so much for submitting your email, and that's right down the road from me. I've been to that area many times, and it's pretty remote for being off of I-44. There are definitely Sasquatch all around that area, so you know what my answer is going to be. There's a lot of Bigfoot reports all around the Merrimack River. Now, of course, there are bears around the area, but we talked about it, and you guys camped in that area, went to bed, and the creature didn't start making all this ruckus until around 1 in the morning. So whatever it was angry that you guys were in its territory. I feel like a bear would just take off and not come out until there's no one else around, to where a Sasquatch is going to keep its ground and throw a fit. All right, moving on to the next email, and this story was sent in by Brent. In the mid-90s, in McMinnville, Tennessee, in a subdivision nested in the side of the mountain, another kid and I had been out playing in the mountain all day. It became late in the evening, and we started to go home. As we were walking home, we suddenly got the weirdest feeling we were being watched or followed. So I picked up the pace a little bit. When we finally came out of the woods, there was a hayfield we crossed, which led to my backyard. Just before we got to the barbed wire fence, we had to crawl under it to get to my yard. We heard what sounded like a pretty good-sized branch break. As we turned to see what it was, there he stood in full view, about 80 yards. He had to have been 7 feet, maybe a little more, and he probably weighed about 300 pounds plus. After 20 seconds, he started to go back into the wood line. The other kid took off running towards him. Once we reached the wood line, all of a sudden, 50 yards or so ahead of us in the woods came the brightest flash of light I've ever seen. So we turned towards home and booked it as fast as we could. The following morning, we went back to investigate the area the light had came from. There was a tree that was destroyed, and it was not like that before. It was pretty amazing, actually. All right, Brent, I appreciate you sharing your story, and it was a little bit difficult to read, and I'm glad it was shortened down. Guys, if you submit your email, just make sure it's legible and it makes sense. A lot of that story I kind of had to improvise and not really make up what happened, but just fill in words and gaps. So I don't want to do that, but I do appreciate you taking the time to submit your story, and I understood what you were saying. It just made my job a lot harder. So just keep that in mind for future writers. Make sure you take the time to write up your story, and it'll come out a lot faster. You know, a lot of times that's what slows down the Bigfoot emails is people not taking the proper time to write everything down, but it's no big deal, and we will move on to the next email. Thank you. All right, in this next email, an anonymous guest wants to share their encounters from Cuba, Missouri. Hello, Miguel. Sorry it took a while to reply back. If it's okay with you, I would rather stay in the background, kind of say and give you tips here and there, if you want to hear them. The experiences I had, and some of them with my family, were really frightening and weird. Just not really comfortable in telling all of my experiences yet, but I will tell you in a few, at least the Bigfoot ones, since we both experienced them. I am still trying to make sense of it, but I will tell you the experience my youngest daughter had while we lived in Cuba, Missouri. The same place as the weird dog man thing and the mysterious huge dog prints that turned into human footprints. It was around 2010, and my youngest of 10 years old. But first I have to explain my experience because it fits in with hers. I was standing at the sink washing supper dishes when I looked out the window that was in front of the kitchen sink. About 50 yards was the tree line from the house with a clearing in between that. And right by one of the trees that stood by the edge of the clearing, I seen a huge, hairy, human gorilla-shaped thing. It was slightly rocking side to side, watching the house. I was like, what the heck? It was like it knew it was spotted. Then what really freaked me out was when it stood up. It looked really tall and massive. Then it just ran behind the tree it was standing by and disappeared. I was flabbergasted. I guess it was squatting when it was rocking side to side. I told my husband what I'd seen. I could tell he didn't believe me, so I just shut up about it. Here is what my daughter experienced. So a few days went by. I was cooking supper, and she ran in flipping out. When my husband and I calmed her down, she said she was playing on the front porch like she always had when she heard like a human whistle. She turned to see who it was when she seen the huge silhouette of the same thing I seen a few days ago. She said she felt really horrified. Right when she kind of shook off the fear, she then seen it drop to its belly, slither through the grass towards the house. It was coming at her fast. She said that's why she was freaking out as she ran inside. She was scared for days after that, not wanting to go outside unless one of us was with her. The next time it was seen was by my husband Eric. That's when he definitely became a believer. He loves the deer hunt, and we needed the meat, so he sat out late afternoon to go sit in the deer stand. He sat in the deer stand till dusk and wanted to make it home before dark. He said he was walking back towards the house when he felt something watching him. He looked around but didn't see anything, so he started walking again, but faster. After he almost reached the clearing that was in front of the house, he heard something huge behind him. He said as he swung around, he seen this tall, huge, hairy humanoid shape walking away from him. He said it scared him so bad, he just bolted back towards the house. He only seen it for a few seconds because the stride of this thing was fast, but you could definitely hear it crashing through the woods. And why he didn't see it until then, I do believe that since I had talked to other people and watched videos of other experiences, I do believe they can definitely go invisible. And there is a guy named Scott Carpenter that has caught them also coming out of portals with video proof. I do believe that is another reason or another way they travel. When you see them is only when they want you to see them. Same with the dog man. But that is just a few more experiences I and my family had. The last encounter we had was only a couple years back, and it was on Sellers Road between Viburnum and Cherryville. My husband, grandson, and I were going to a woman's house to pick up a lovebird she was giving me. After we picked up the bird, we headed back, and we were going slow due to the gravel road being terrible. We were going slow because we didn't want to mess up our car. As we were approaching the bend in the road, all of a sudden, a huge rock comes flying out of the woods and smacks the passenger side mirror, shattering it and tearing off the mirror holder from the car. We were all dumbfounded. I rolled down my window and suddenly felt fear-stricken. I learned to pay attention to that with all the experiences I had in the past, and yelled at my husband to go as I quickly rolled up the window. As we hurried, not caring about the car anymore, we rounded that bend, and there was a good-sized doe standing in the middle of the gravel road staring at us. And then towards the woods on my side. It then raised its tail and bolted into the woods on my husband's side. I was like, now I know why it's mad at us. We interrupted it getting that deer. We continued to hurry back to the blacktop and back home in Stillville. We really don't go out in the woods anymore. All my life, I have attracted weird and supernatural things. I guess that's why I love the sanctuary of my home in town, even though I do miss being in the woods. Maybe one day I will return and enjoy it again before I die. When I do, I pray Bigfoot or Dogman is not there to greet me. Keep up the awesome interviews. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Just please stay wary. There are things in the woods other than just Bigfoot. God bless and prayers. Sincerely, your fan. Can't say the name. Thank you so much for submitting your encounters, and I am very familiar with this area. It's actually like a town or two away from that Bourbon, Missouri story I just read earlier, where the lady and the husband heard those sounds coming from the cave off the Merrimack River. I did contact the lady who sent in the email, and she didn't really seem to want to talk and share information, and the photos she did send over were kind of blurry, and I couldn't really see anything, so it was hard to communicate and get an interview out of her. But I do appreciate her reaching out and taking the time to write up her story, so thank you so much. I believe her story because there's been a lot of encounters from that area, and I've had some encounters there myself. So Crawford County is certainly a hot area amongst many other counties in Missouri. A lot of people are into the pareidolia. I'm not so much, but I don't discredit people that had encounters, actually seen things, and then take photos and try to make out what they actually seen, make sense of it. So don't discredit somebody if they're showing you a blurry photo. They're just trying to make sense for how these things hide. How are they able to hide and stay away from drones and satellites, thermal imagery? People are just trying to make sense of the paranormal that's associated with the activity. So I understand, but I like to see clear photos, clear video, and I'll tell you why. Because there's a lot of them online. There's actually a lot of trail cam photos, a lot of videos that people have gotten of the Sasquatch. Whether you believe, Bob Gimlin and the Independence Day footage, there's a lot of different videos. It doesn't mean it's not real just because you think it's fake or you think it's a man in a suit. I will also add, though, people that are representing the Bigfoot community or just the Bigfoot subject in general, when you do show skeptics these photos and non-believers as proof of Bigfoot, it really makes everyone else look bad. And, that's the reason people don't want to talk and share their story, because I feel like they know that there's just not much there. If someone was super confident that they had something on video or on a photo, they would openly show it. They wouldn't say who they were, but, they would share it with people and be like, I think I got something. But when people share pareidolia and then aren't willing to talk, it kind of speaks for itself. So if you reach out, just make sure you share your encounter. That's all I ask for. There's no need to share all these photos, and it's just a turn off, So my apologies if I offend people, but that's just the way I see it, and I think that's the way a lot of other people see it too. So it is what it is, and we'll move on. Alrighty, moving on to the next Bigfoot email. This story was submitted by Bill Nowak. And I typically don't use last names, but I'm starting to notice a trend and generic names used. So I want it to be more believable. And I feel like if you present your first and last name and don't say not to use it, I'm going to use it. Okay. Because it adds credibility to the story and it makes each story a little bit more unique. So if I only get stories that are, Bill, John, after a while that gets confusing. So I appreciate this writer sharing his information. And on another note, I've noticed a lot of people in the past that use their first and last name and they type up a big story and at the end say, don't use my name. So don't write in a story with your name if you don't want it used, because that's putting a lot more pressure on the channel and the person that's reading it off, because they don't know you and that could accidentally, get by. So if you don't want your name used, just use your first name. Don't send out your last name. All right, let's get into this next email. The title of it is My Encounter. Recently, I've been gathering notes I've made regarding what happened to me near Mena, Arkansas, in the Ouachita National Forest on my 17th birthday, March 8th, 1976. It's quite a long story, so I'll give you the short version. While at my aunt's place near Mena, Arkansas in March of 1976, I was watching over my aunt's place while she went to Little Rock for an operation. That day, I woke up around 5:30 a.m. and got busy tending to her animals and grabbing a bite to eat. I decided to celebrate my birthday with a hike into the national forest. I figured I'd have quite a time in 1.8 million acres. Long story short, about 6 hours after I started my hike, I'd find myself in a life and death struggle with virtually no chance of survival. I was caught in a slide of a mountain of stacked timber. When I stopped, I was pinned in place. Broken bones, torn flesh, punctured lung, and bleeding very badly. I found myself getting right with God because I knew it wouldn't be long. I'd give in to my injuries and just perish. Earlier, I'd met up with a logging crew, but I was close to 2 miles from them, and I realized even if they arrived, they'd certainly need equipment to help me in any way. Time was short. Out of nowhere, I hear limbs snapping somewhere below me. Oh my God, it's one of the guys I'd spoke with earlier, but it wasn't man. What happened next not only saved my life, but would change my life in a way I never thought possible. I'm 63 now. I still take medication, have panic attacks, and wake up soaked in sweat with night terrors. In 1976, it was a different time, different people, an entire different way of life. When I awoke in the hospital, they said the first thing I attempted to do was to scream. I instantly knew to keep my mouth shut and not utter a word of what I went through. I really didn't want to end up in a padded room 10 years later after being comfortable enough with the psychiatrist I'd been seeing. I opened up about my PTSD. My doctor insisted it would be beneficial to do hypnosis therapy. But after having a panic attack during the hypnosis and losing my bodily functions again, he stated he'd learned enough to change my direction of treatment. I watch all these shows, listen to all these podcasts where people are doing everything possible to have contact with these creatures. They are so blind in so many respects. That's right. It was no man that saved my life. It was no man that lifted 3 trees from my chest that weighed 3,000 to 4,000 pounds. And it was no man that climbed up, bent over 5 to 6 feet from my face, steam blasting from its giant nostrils, grunting, looking at me in the eyes. I've often wondered how those researchers would do seeing something like that. Anyway, that's a short version, and the shame is I doubled my dose of meds so I could write this. I really enjoy your podcast. Keep up the great work. I'm trying, as I said, to get everything down. It may take a while. At least it's welded in my memory, every detail. Some of these folks should really think about what they wish for, because you're never the same, ever. Bill Nowak, Toledo, Ohio. Bill, thank you so much for sending in your encounter, and I apologize that it took so long to finally read off your email, and it was an excellent story. I wish I would have got to it earlier, and I wish that I had the opportunity to hear your encounter in person. That would be amazing, and, I'm sorry to hear that you're having difficulties in life and you have to take medication for it, and it's something that everybody has to go through eventually, so I wish you the best, and I hope you get feeling better. Bill, if you are listening to this, I would love to interview you, and if you would like to tell your story someday over the phone, I think it would be very beneficial to the story. And, I just have a lot of questions, like, how did this creature look like? Was there more than one? And how did it feel like being underneath all of those logs, knowing that your life was about to end in a few moments? Yeah, for sure. If there's any way I could hear this story, definitely reach back out to me. And I know it would be an excellent one. So hopefully you hear this and you reach out, man. Wishing you the best of luck. All right, moving on to the next Bigfoot email. All right, this next email was submitted by Tammy, and the title is 1940 Hellhound Encounter. In the 1940s, at Mineral Point, Missouri, my husband's great uncle Henry Keys, in his teens, was always pulling pranks. One time he stopped up the local church chimney, smoking the congregations out of church. Later on, Henry Keys was walking home at nighttime. Something was following him home. Henry Keys ran home as fast as he could. The ominous creature was as black as a panther, with glowing red eyes. Henry Keys made it home, but the creature continued to scratch on the outer walls of the log cabin all night, trying to get into their log cabin with dirt floors. The Keys family lit candles and prayed to God all night for redemption. Finally, the creature left at dawn and never returned. Tammy, thank you so much for writing in your story, and it was a frightening one. I certainly believe in hellhounds, and they're certainly around the Ozarks of Missouri, so I have no doubt Mr. Keys ran into some type of strange creature. I do feel like the cryptids are connected to our sins. I know that's strange to say, and a lot of people don't believe in the Bible, but if you have this unbalance in your life that needs to be fixed, these creatures will show up. It doesn't necessarily have to be sin, in my opinion, and it's just theory. It could be a person that is very sick or someone that's getting ready to go through some type of illness. The cryptid creatures will show up for some weird reason. I don't know why. They are like the Grim Reapers of the forest, is the best way I can describe it. Alright, I'll tell you guys my own personal story with the hellhound. I don't like sharing these stories because there's too many of them, and I know the listeners will be like, that's too much. Oh yeah, you have so many encounters, huh? You're seeing things. Well, it's the truth. I've had a lot of encounters throughout my entire life. But yeah, let's get into it. So, a friend of mine, his name was Bruce, We were road tripping. We were on a highway in Missouri called Highway K, I think it's called, or Highway K. And we were heading to the Merrimack River. We were on our way to a road called Riverside Road. And as we were going down Highway K, it was about dark time. Actually, it was dark time. It just got dark, and we were going down this big hill, getting ready to go and make a left on Riverside Road. We spotted a possum that was crossing the highway, and he had his brights on. So with him being him, he pressed down on the gas pedal, floored it, and I'm like, well, what are you doing? And I guess he was trying to hit this possum. We were in high school and we didn't know any better. So as he's going about 70 on a highway that you're only supposed to go 55 on, this big dog leaps out of the woods and dives across the highway, snatches up this possum, throws it up in its mouth, and tosses it around shakes it around like a rag doll, and then jumps back into the forest that it came out of. That scared me to the core. This creature was like 2 or 3 times bigger than a blue pit. It had that same color as a blue pit, like this grayish blue color. It had really short hair, but around its neck, it had hair like a lion, like really long hair around its neck. And its face, like it really resembled like a hyena. But remember, the hair is like this bluish gray color. Just the structure of a hyena's face was the same as this thing's snout. It was really big, had a really big face. I always laughed it off and was like, man, that's just a wild dog. We saw Cujo, just kind of made jokes about it, but I know what I saw. And years later, when I was watching Monster Quest, I'm not sure what episode it was, they were talking about hellhounds, and they showed a description of the creature, and it was exactly the same. Down to the T. Everything was exactly the same. And that's when I started thinking, oh my gosh, what if that was a cryptid creature? What was that? And even after that Monster Quest episode, I always thought, that was just a wild dog. Dogs breeding in the wild, they live strictly in the wild, and just they lost their owners throughout time and bred and have had wild pups that have grown up. That was my theory. But yeah, I didn't know there were hellhounds. I knew about Bigfoot, then I learned about Dogman. But it's scary finding out how many creatures are actually living out in the forest. It's frightening, guys. You never know what you're going to run into. Is it just going to be Bigfoot, or will you see Goatman or Mothman? You just never know. You never know, guys. So always keep an open mind, and when you're venturing in the forest, bring a sidearm and watch your back. Make sure you're with people, and always have a backup plan. Know the terrain that you're exploring in, understand the trails, where you're going to be, and study that terrain. Don't just go off of your phones. Make sure you pay attention to the ridges that you're on and the drainages that lead down into the creek bottoms. That will help you find your way back home. So if you rely on GPS on a device, you might get lost because electronics are not reliable. It's best to practice both in case one or the other fails. But yeah, guys, that's the end of this episode, and I hope you guys enjoyed all of the Bigfoot emails and cryptid encounters that were submitted into the channel. If you would like to help support the channel, please scroll down and head over to my Spread Shop website, and you can purchase some merchandise today. If you enjoyed these stories and this content, please like and subscribe. Hit the bell notification to stay up to date with all of my future content. Thank you again for everybody who tuned in today, and I appreciate you guys for listening. Be safe and take care out there.